From the moment I drove through the wrought iron gates of River Glen Heights, it seemed like an idyllic place to call home. Perfectly manicured lawns spanned both sides of the winding road, and neat sidewalks bordered by bright flower beds offered a welcoming sight. In that early summer dusk, the houses appeared warm and inviting, with porch lights twinkling in even rows. I'd spent years moving from base to base. My position as a high-ranking officer in the Army demanded constant relocation. But this time, I was determined to find a real sense of permanence for my family. My twin sons were in high school, and my wife, Evelyn, was eager to put down roots after so many half-finished chapters in different places. River Glen Heights came recommended by a fellow officer who had once lived there, describing it as peaceful, with a strong sense of community. Little did I know that beneath the outward calm lurked a knot of tension, woven by the Homeowners Association. And not just any HOA. A particularly zealous board led by Marcia Tanner, a middle-aged woman all the neighbors secretly called Karen behind her back, allegedly due to her constant need to speak to the manager and her unwavering belief in her own infallibility. I'd heard stories of such HOAs, ones that enforced unbelievably strict rules on everything from mailbox color to the exact shade of grass you were allowed to cultivate. Still, I never imagined I would see the day when an HOA tried to interfere with Army operations, nor that it would lead to a high-stakes confrontation. As I steered into my new driveway that first evening, I simply smiled at the charming architecture and well-groomed landscaping, quietly hoping that this time, life would remain peaceful. But fate, especially in the form of someone like Karen, had other plans. The first weeks in River Glen Heights passed in relative harmony. My family and I were still unpacking, and I was often at Fort Brightwell, our nearby Army installation, overseeing schedules, trainings, and the final touches on a soon-to-launch logistics operation. One Saturday afternoon, I was mowing our front lawn when a small, stern-looking woman in her mid-50s approached. Her hair was cut into a short, fashionable bob, and she wore pressed khakis paired with a pastel blouse. Her stride and posture exuded authority. With a polite but forced smile, she lifted a hand in greeting. "Hello there," she called, raising her voice above the hum of the mower. "I'm Marcia Tanner, the Homeowners Association president. Most folks around here just call me Marcia, or Karen, if you want to be informal." She let out a chuckle that died quickly. "Welcome to River Glen Heights." I powered down the lawnmower. "Good to meet you. I'm David Beckett." She nodded. "I've been meaning to drop by. My apologies for taking so long. I'd love to chat about some of the community guidelines and get you up to speed on how we maintain our lovely neighborhood." I wiped sweat from my brow. "Sure, I appreciate that. My wife and I were planning to attend the next HOA meeting to learn more." Karen's eyes lit up. "Perfect. Our monthly meeting is on Tuesday evening at the clubhouse. Here." She handed me a thick envelope. "These are the official HOA documents. You can skim them if you have a free moment. Or you can wait until the meeting, where we'll go through some key updates. We'll also be discussing landscaping standards for summer. Important stuff." Her tone hinted at a seriousness far beyond the typical neighborly chat. I forced a polite smile. "Thanks, I'll look through it." As she turned to leave, she cast a glance at my lawn, a near-obsessive look. "By the way, your grass is just about perfect. Keep it under 4 inches, and you'll never have trouble." She flashed a tight grin and walked off. I stood there wondering how someone could be so cordial yet ominous. It was my first direct experience with River Glen's reputed HOA hawk. I shrugged it off. I'd handled more formidable obstacles in the Army. How bad could an overzealous HOA board really be? That Tuesday, I attended the HOA meeting at the neighborhood clubhouse, a charming building with a pitched roof and large windows overlooking the lake. About 30 residents sat on folding chairs, facing a long table where Karen presided with 2 other board members, Edgar Morrison, the treasurer, a meek, quiet man in his 60s, and Allison Cho, the secretary, who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Karen cleared her throat and kicked off the proceedings with a list of agenda items, everything from driveway pressure washing schedules to newly approved paint colors. I quickly realized these folks took their rules extremely seriously. Near the end of the meeting, a neighbor raised his hand. He was tall, with a neatly trimmed beard, and introduced himself as Thomas King. "I wanted to bring up a concern about traffic in and out of the neighborhood this coming month. There's a rumor that part of our main road, might be used by Army trucks. Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, I've heard something along those lines. But let's keep that rumor where it belongs. Rumors. If the military wants to drive through River Glen Heights, they need to follow all established HOA protocols. She gave a meaningful glance around the room. We have speed limits, road use permits, and scheduling restrictions to maintain peace. A murmur spread among the residents. My ears perked up. I knew that a supply convoy from Fort Brightwell was slated to pass near our neighborhood on a route that county officials had approved. Was she implying that the Army would need her permission? Thomas pushed on. I'm not sure if the Army even knows about our local guidelines. Karen cut him off. Then they'll find out soon enough. Rules are rules, whether you're a local resident or someone else. She ended with a dismissive gesture. A twinge of annoyance rippled through me, but I said nothing. If she only knew who I was, she might hold her tongue. But so far, I'd kept my rank and position low-key, introducing myself simply as David, new in the area. Part of me wanted to see how she handled things without flexing my own authority right off the bat. The meeting concluded with a chorus of forced smiles and polite goodnights. Karen shot me a curious look as I left, but I chalked it up to her simply making note of new residents. In the back of my mind, though, the tension about possible Army traffic in the area lodged itself as an early sign of trouble. Back at Fort Brightwell, I oversaw a major logistical project, a joint training exercise that involved transporting equipment and supplies across several counties. The plan, coordinated with the state's Department of Transportation and local municipalities, called for a convoy of 5 large trucks and 3 support vehicles. The route was chosen for efficiency and minimal disruption to local traffic, an important consideration in any military movement stateside. One segment of that route wound around the outskirts of River Glen Heights, using a county-maintained road that passed behind the neighborhood. In an ideal scenario, the convoy would pass through in under 10 minutes, leaving hardly any disturbance. No special permits were needed beyond the standard state transportation guidelines, because the road was not privately owned. However, if Karen's comments were any indication, the HOA might challenge even legally sanctioned use of the road, especially if they believed it was theirs to regulate. I was certain she didn't have a legal leg to stand on, but HOAs sometimes create logistical and bureaucratic nightmares regardless of actual jurisdiction. And so, while finalizing the route, I phoned the county's Department of Transportation. Hey, Kelly. I greeted the official I frequently worked with. Just double-checking that County Road 48 behind River Glen is definitely public, correct? Kelly laughed. Absolutely. We don't do private roads out that way. The developer tried to donate land to the HOA for a private road originally, but the county never accepted that. So that entire stretch belongs to the county and is open to public and commercial use. Music to my ears. Legally, the convoy could pass unimpeded. Yet I had a nagging feeling that Karen might attempt some roadblock, literal or metaphorical. With that in mind, I requested a small detachment of military police, MPs, to accompany the convoy, just in case. Typically, such a request would be an overreaction. But anyone who's seen a determined HOA at work knows they can stir up a drama that spills from the local sphere into more significant arenas. And with Karen's energy, I suspected a showdown was in the making. Over the next few days, I heard rumors from other neighbors about Karen's watch list. She allegedly kept tabs on people who violated HOA rules. If your lawn was more than an inch too high, or if you left trash cans out past 9 a.m. on collection day, you'd receive a stern letter. If that wasn't enough, fines would follow, sometimes with questionable legality. Complaining about it usually led nowhere. The board members, intimidated by Karen's overbearing style, rarely challenged her. I also learned Karen prided herself on knowing everyone's business. She apparently bragged that she'd discovered one neighbor was subletting a portion of their home without HOA approval and forced them to evict the tenant or face daily fines. Another neighbor had replaced their front porch light with a bulb that was too bright, prompting an official complaint. These stories circulated among residents like campfire horror tales. In the midst of these anecdotes, more chatter about the Army convoy started popping up on the neighborhood's online forum, managed, of course, by Karen. People posted concerns about potential noise, possible damage to the roads, and the risk of strange military trucks rolling through. The majority of residents seemed unbothered or even supportive, especially those with military backgrounds. But Karen and a vocal minority whipped up alarm. I occasionally chimed in under my forum username, D. Beckett, calmly explaining that the Army was extremely careful with local roads and that any damages, if they occurred, would be promptly addressed through existing government channels. But each time, Karen or one of her supporters retorted with statements like, "Who's going to ensure we're not stuck with the bill? The Army can't just waltz in without HOA clearance." Finally, one evening, Karen herself posted a strongly worded message. From HOA President, Karen, subject, unapproved military traffic. Neighbors, it has come to our attention that large military vehicles may soon be using our neighborhood roads. The HOA has not authorized any such activity. While we respect our nation's armed forces, we must ensure they follow the same protocols required of any heavy vehicle traffic to protect property values and infrastructure. Failure to comply with HOA guidelines could result in fines or legal action. We will not allow unauthorized disruption of our peaceful community. Respectfully, Marcia Karen Tanner, President, River Glen Heights HOA. Reading this, I couldn't help but laugh at the phrase unauthorized disruption. The Army had every legal right to drive on that county road, whether the HOA liked it or not. Still, a prickle of annoyance gnawed at me. She was sowing fear and anger among neighbors, and she was about to pick a fight she couldn't possibly win. One bright Wednesday morning, about a week before the scheduled convoy, I was getting my mail when I saw Karen's silver SUV pull up in front of my house. She stepped out, carrying an official-looking folder. She wore a taut, professional smile, but I sensed tension in her posture. "David," she greeted briskly, "do you have a moment to discuss something important?" I nodded, though part of me braced for whatever was coming. "Sure, let's chat on the porch." We settled on my front porch chairs. Evelyn, catching sight of us through the window, decided to stay inside, likely sensing the conversation might be contentious. Karen cleared her throat. "I'm here in my capacity as HOA president. We have concerns about Army vehicles possibly using River Glen roads. I believe you might have some knowledge about this." Her gaze sharpened. "You seem well-informed in our forum comments." I kept my tone neutral. "Yes, I've heard talk. County Road 48 runs along the backside of the neighborhood, but it's public property." Karen nodded impatiently. "Technically, it's county-owned, but it interfaces directly with our community. The wear and tear could still affect us, so we're requiring the Army, or whoever is in charge of these trucks, to submit an application to the HOA, along with a road use fee and a deposit for potential damages." My eyebrows rose. "A deposit?" "Yes, it's a standard practice," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We require it from construction companies or large delivery vehicles that repeatedly use our roads. It's only fair the Army do the same." I paused to measure my words. "Karen, the Army is operating under a route approved by the state and the county. This type of request, demanding fees from the military, simply isn't how it works." Her lips pressed together. "River Glen has always maintained impeccable roads and minimal noise. If these convoys pass through without abiding by our rules, we'll have no choice but to take legal action or physically block them if necessary." The casual threat caught me off guard. "Physically block them? That sounds extreme." Karen shrugged. "The board stands firm on this. Our property values depend on a quiet, safe neighborhood. We can't let random trucks roll in." A flash of irritation ran through me. I was about to reveal my identity, the base commander at Fort Brightwell, and shut this down decisively. But I checked that impulse. Instead, I said, "Well, let's just say I doubt that's a step you want to take. The Army doesn't typically yield to local HOAs when it comes to lawful movements." She shot me a condescending smile. "We'll see. Perhaps you can pass on the message to whoever is in charge." With that, she stood, patted her folder, and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement. My head spun with disbelief. If Karen thought the Army would pay her fees or bend to her invented regulations, she was about to learn a harsh lesson. But something in her unwavering arrogance made me suspect she'd follow through on that threat to block the convoy. She had no clue who I actually was, or the trouble she'd invite by interfering with federal military operations. Later that day, I convened an internal briefing at Fort Brightwell. Aside from a few staff officers, I also invited the base's legal advisor, Captain Julia Morales, who specialized in military compliance with civilian jurisdictions. I explained the situation. We have a local HOA under the impression they can restrict us from using County Road 48. They've threatened to physically block us if we don't pay them a road use fee. Legally, the road is county property. We already have county and state clearance, correct? Captain Morales nodded. Yes, sir. No further permission is required from any private entity. If they attempt to impede the convoy, it becomes a potential matter of federal concern, obstruction of military personnel in the performance of duties. I inhaled. So we're on solid ground. Good. However, I want to handle this with minimal friction. Let's coordinate with local law enforcement to ensure the route is clear on the day of the movement. We can also have a small MP detail in case of any confrontation. Lieutenant Colonel Addison, one of my logistics officers, frowned. Are we expecting real interference, sir? I offered a tight smile. I sincerely hope not. But better safe than sorry. The board president of the HOA is enthusiastic, to put it mildly. He nodded, and the group dispersed, each assigned tasks to ensure a smooth operation. As they left, I lingered in the briefing room, a swirl of emotions running through me. On one hand, this was just a petty neighborhood clash. On the other, HOAs have been known to escalate small disputes into headline-making fiascos. Still, I had the upper hand. The Army had the full backing of the law. Even if Karen tried to stand in our way, it would be a short-lived protest. I only hope no one got hurt in the process. In the days leading up to the scheduled convoy, tension in River Glen Heights reached a fever pitch. Karen posted a community alert on the forum titled Emergency Action, Protect Our Streets. She alleged that a rowdy group of Army vehicles could overrun our roads at any time, urging residents to be vigilant. Many neighbors, most of whom had family ties to the military or at least respect for the armed forces, found this hysterical, if not offensive. They voiced support for the troops, questioning Karen's stance. A smaller faction, however, rallied behind her, echoing fear of heavy trucks damaging property or scaring children. Meanwhile, I continued my routine, drop the kids at school, head to Fort Brightwell, oversee final logistics. Despite the drama, my staff and I were determined to remain professional. If Karen wanted a confrontation, we would respond lawfully. We had zero intention of bowing to an HOA's permit demands. One evening, after a late shift at the base, I pulled into my driveway to find a bright orange sign staked in my front lawn. Warning: this property, lot number 17, is under investigation for non-compliance with River Glen Heights HOA guidelines. Pending fines or liens may apply. My jaw clenched. Non-compliance? I marched up to the sign, reading the fine print. It claimed I'd failed to register potential heavy vehicle traffic associated with my household. Essentially, Karen was penalizing me personally for not disclosing the Army trucks. This was so blatantly outlandish that I couldn't help but chuckle through the anger. Still, an official warning sign on my lawn was a direct provocation. I yanked it out and stored it in my garage as evidence. Enough was enough. Tomorrow, I decided, I would reveal my position as the base commander directly to Karen, making it crystal clear that the Army's route was none of her business, and that her intimidation tactics wouldn't fly. The next morning, I called Karen and asked if she could stop by my house for a chat, invoking concerns about the sign she'd placed. She arrived promptly, wearing the same forced smile as always, folder in hand. We sat in my living room this time. She crossed her legs and leveled a steely gaze at me. I assume you want to discuss your non-compliance status? I nodded, forcing calm. Yes. The sign you put up mentioned potential heavy vehicle traffic from my household. That's inaccurate. I don't personally own a heavy vehicle that's going to rumble through the neighborhood. Karen pursed her lips. Well, you're obviously associated with the Army, correct? You posted supportive comments online. If so, you should have disclosed that to the HOA. We can't have private individuals, military or not, bringing convoys here. I exhaled slowly. I think there's been a misunderstanding about who, exactly, is coming through. This convoy is part of a larger Army operation. It's using County Road 48, which is public. The HOA has zero jurisdiction over that route. Her expression hardened. We'll see about that. Our attorneys. I cut her off gently. Karen, do you know who I am? She blinked. David Beckett, new resident. Right. But I'm also Colonel David Beckett, commander of Fort Brightwell. That convoy you're so concerned about is under my direct authority. We have full permission from the county and state. I'd strongly advise you not to interfere. It would be considered obstructing federal operations." Karen's cheeks reddened. For once, she seemed caught off guard. But her surprise quickly morphed into defiance. "I see. So you've been hiding behind the curtain. That doesn't change the fact that these trucks will come dangerously close to our homes." I shook my head. "They'll pass on the county road for a few minutes. No harm, no noise ordinance violations, and no reason for the HOA to get involved. That's final." She squared her shoulders. "I'll have to speak with the board. Our stance remains firm. If the Army wants to use roads adjacent to our community, they must submit to our guidelines." Her words bristled with condescension, despite knowing my official standing. I clenched my fists beneath the coffee table, controlling my frustration. "The Army does not answer to an HOA. Karen, this is your final warning. Attempting to physically block or impede the convoy is illegal. You could face serious federal consequences." Karen's smile returned, but it was icier than ever. "I appreciate your candidness, Colonel. Let's see who has more influence, the HOA protecting community property or your so-called authority." With that, she stood and left, head held high. My stomach churned. We had reached a tipping point. If she truly went through with blocking the convoy, she was about to learn that the federal government doesn't play games. The morning of the convoy dawned clear and bright. At Fort Brightwell, the drivers inspected their vehicles, several Army transport trucks carrying equipment, plus the support vehicles. We had a small MP squad accompanying the convoy, ready to respond to any unforeseen obstruction. No one wanted a direct confrontation with local residents, but we were prepared. I watched from the command center as the truck set off around 0900 hours. I'd be joining them shortly, riding in a Humvee at the rear. The route took about 30 minutes to reach the county road behind River Glen Heights. Sure enough, at approximately 0940, our lead vehicle radioed in. "Convoy lead to commander. We have an unexpected blockage ahead. Looks like a line of civilian vehicles parked across the road." My jaw tightened. "Roger that. Hold position. MPs, move forward and assess." I hopped into my Humvee and sped down to the site. Arriving on scene, I saw it. Half a dozen civilian cars arranged in a row, effectively barricading the Tulane County road. Standing in front was Karen, along with a handful of other HOA loyalists, some holding homemade signs that read, "Stop Army Overreach," and "HOA Rules First." Unbelievable. The lead MP vehicle pulled up, lights flashing. Two military police officers stepped out, approaching Karen. Over my headset, I heard their measured exchange. "MP officer, ma'am, you are obstructing a public roadway in violation of federal and state law. We need you to move these vehicles immediately." "Karen, I'm the president of the HOA. This road abuts private property. We haven't authorized your trucks to pass." "MP officer, ma'am, I need you to disperse and move the cars now, or we will tow them. Failure to comply could result in arrest." Karen planted her hands on her hips. "Then you'll be arresting me. We're protecting our neighborhood. Get your trucks out of here." I stepped out of my Humvee and walked toward the blockade, my uniform making it crystal clear who I was. I could sense the tension thickening in the air. Soldiers and neighbors alike watched from a distance. "Karen," I called, "don't do this. You are breaking the law. Move your cars, and nobody has to get arrested." She turned, eyes blazing. "Colonel Beckett, so this is how you treat civilians, threatening us with jail unless we bow to your might." She gestured at her group. "We're peaceful. We just want to guarantee that these trucks won't tear up our roads." I took a slow breath. "I've already told you, the route is legal and approved. You're blocking federal property in transit. If you don't clear out, we will remove you." Her lips curled into a sneer. "We'll see." I motioned to the MPs. They gave a final warning over the loudspeaker. "This is the military police under the authority of the United States Army and in coordination with county law enforcement. You are illegally blocking a public roadway. Move your vehicles now or face immediate legal action." For a moment, the standoff held. Then, one of the HOA supporters, a middle-aged man, looked uneasy. He whispered something to Karen, but she shook her head vehemently. The standoff continued until the wail of sirens announced the arrival of county deputies. They pulled up behind us, lights flashing. The highest-ranking deputy approached me. "Colonel Beckett," he greeted, shaking my hand. "We got your alert. We'll assist in clearing these vehicles." They're trespassing on a public road. Karen's supporters started to look nervous. The deputy repeated the order to disperse. When they still refused, the officers began issuing citations. One by one, neighbors caved, moving their vehicles off the road, except for Karen's SUV, which remained dead center, engine off. She stood defiantly beside it. "All right, Miss Tanner," the deputy said, exasperated. "This is your last chance. Go ahead," she snapped. "Arrest me if you must. I'm standing up for the rights of—" She didn't finish her sentence. Two officers gently guided her away from the SUV, cuffed her hands behind her back, and read her the Miranda warning. Karen shrieked in protest, shouting about illegal persecution and "my lawyers will destroy you." But it was done. The blockade was broken. I looked away, trying to steady the swirl of emotions. I'd warned her repeatedly. She had no one to blame but herself. With the cars cleared, the army convoy proceeded down the road, the trucks rumbling by. Soldiers stared as they passed, some shaking their heads at the bizarre sight of an HOA president in handcuffs on the shoulder of the road. I felt a pang of embarrassment for my neighborhood. Yet relief surged through me. At least the situation had been handled calmly, with minimal escalation. By lunchtime, the convoy safely reached its destination. A wave of relief washed over me as I confirmed that all equipment was delivered intact. But the real storm was just beginning in River Glen Heights. Within hours, local news outlets heard about the confrontation. One station even had a helicopter overhead filming the arrested HOA president, reporting on how a group led by an HOA official attempted to block an army convoy. Social media exploded with commentary, some outraged at the perceived disrespect toward the military, others questioning how an HOA could become so tyrannical. Hashtags like #HOASArmy trended locally, fueling a swirl of debates online. At the same time, Karen spent that afternoon at the county detention facility, being processed for obstruction of a public roadway and interfering with military operations. The latter carried potential federal implications, which meant a judge might want to make an example of her. That evening, the HOA board scrambled to distance itself from Karen's actions. Edgar Morrison, the treasurer, posted a statement on the forum. "Dear neighbors, we regret to inform you that the HOA was not officially consulted prior to Ms. Tanner's decision to personally block the Army convoy. Her actions do not reflect the entire board's stance. We respect all laws and appreciate our military service. We will update you on the status of the HOA leadership as soon as possible. Respectfully, Edgar Morrison, Treasurer, River Glen Heights HOA." Behind closed doors, neighbors gossiped relentlessly about the fiasco. My wife, Evelyn, told me how she'd overheard someone at the local grocery store exclaim, "Did you see Karen on the news, screaming while they arrested her?" Everyone had an opinion. Some found it comedic, others were horrified. But the consensus was clear. Karen had overreached catastrophically. The weeks that followed saw Karen's legal troubles mount. Initially, she posted bail after her arrest. But while she was out, federal investigators stepped in, reviewing the blockade as a possible violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1382, interfering with or obstructing the armed forces. It's not a charge thrown around lightly, but in extreme cases, like physically blocking a federally sanctioned convoy, it could apply. On top of that, an entire avalanche of civil suits began rolling in. A local trucking company filed a complaint, citing that Karen's blockade had disrupted their schedule. Then county officials threatened to sue the HOA for damages to the road from parked cars idling on the asphalt for hours in scorching heat. The tar had been damaged. Though these suits primarily targeted Karen personally, the HOA faced collateral fallout. During a special HOA meeting, one that Karen was barred from attending, given her status, Edgar tried to rally the remaining board members to mitigate the chaos. But homeowners were furious. Many demanded immediate dissolution of the HOA or, at minimum, the resignation of everyone on the board. Some residents argued that if the board had reined Karen in earlier, the fiasco might have been prevented. Meanwhile, I kept a low profile, focusing on my official duties at Fort Brightwell. Though I'd become a reluctant figure in local news coverage, reporters occasionally tried to reach me for comment. I politely declined, stating only that the Army was lawfully using public roads, and the matter of civilian interference is being handled by the appropriate authorities. Karen, for her part, doubled down in the press. In an interview with a local reporter filmed outside the courthouse, she insisted she was defending her neighborhood from potential property damage and that the government was overreacting. The reporter pointed out that the county had explicitly authorized the Army's route. Karen retorted with claims that the county was in the Army's pocket, fueling conspiracies that had little basis in reality. But conspiracies and defiance don't carry much weight in federal court. And as Karen's hearing date approached, even her closest allies began to see the writing on the wall. She was in over her head. When Karen's federal case finally reached trial, it drew significant local attention. The courthouse was crowded with journalists, some national outlets even picking up the story under headlines like HOA versus the U.S. Army or Suburban Showdown lands HOA president in hot water. I was subpoenaed to testify about the events leading up to the blockade. I recounted how Karen had threatened to block the convoy, despite repeated warnings. Military police officers also provided testimony, corroborating the blockade's details. Karen's defense argued she had the right to protest on a public road, framing her actions as peaceful demonstration. But the prosecution pointed out that she hadn't just stood on the side of the road with signs. She had orchestrated a physical obstruction by parking vehicles in the way. Additionally, the Army was performing official federal duties, protected by a variety of laws ensuring unimpeded movement. In the end, the judge delivered a stern rebuke. "Ms. Tanner, you took it upon yourself to interfere with lawful military operations, despite being fully aware that County Road 48 is public property. Your repeated refusal to move, even under direct orders from law enforcement, constitutes willful obstruction. This court views your actions as a serious matter of public safety and respect for federal authority." She was found guilty on multiple counts, including obstructing a public roadway and interfering with federal military activities, charges that carried the possibility of jail time. The judge sentenced her to several months in federal prison, paired with significant fines. Moreover, civil suits loomed. She owed restitution for the road damage. The county wanted compensation for the police resources diverted to her blockade. And some outraged residents threatened personal lawsuits over the fiasco, tarnishing the neighborhood's reputation. In short, Karen faced a financial catastrophe. By the time the dust settled, she ended up losing her home to cover the court-ordered debts. River Glen Heights, ironically, found itself with a black eye in the real estate market for a while, as news stories continued referencing that HOA that tried to fight the Army. With Karen behind bars, the HOA scrambled to repair its image. They appointed an interim president, Allison Cho, who promised a more neighbor-friendly approach. Many residents clamored for the HOA's dissolution, though that would require a supermajority vote. A fair number stuck around, believing a sensible, reformed board could actually help maintain property values and keep the community safe. During a special session, Allison publicly apologized to me and to the Army for Karen's behavior, clarifying that the HOA would never again attempt to assert authority over legitimate military routes. Her statements helped ease tensions with local officials. Evelyn and I, meanwhile, debated whether to remain in River Glen Heights. Did we really want to live in a place with so much drama in the air? But ironically, with Karen gone, many neighbors were friendlier, forging a sense of camaraderie over the fiasco. We liked our home and had already begun forging real friendships with families who shared our admiration for the military. Ultimately, we decided to stay, believing that in the long run, the neighborhood could heal. Months rolled by, and my family's life settled into a comfortable rhythm. My sons focused on their school sports. Evelyn joined a local gardening club, and I continued my command at Fort Brightwell, occasionally traveling on official assignments. River Glen Heights slowly returned to the peaceful suburb it had been, this time with a humbler HOA. Some neighbors would still whisper about Karen whenever they passed her now vacant house, the front yard overgrown without her watchful scrutiny. She was serving her sentence in a federal facility, her property seized and eventually sold. The new owners painted the house a cheerful yellow, likely a color Karen would never have approved. The moral of the story resonated deeply with the community. Many realized that there's a difference between maintaining neighborhood standards and overstepping authority, especially against federal law. Karen's downfall stood as a cautionary tale of what happens when petty power grabs collide with real, lawful authority. As for me, I took the entire episode as a reminder that challenges can crop up anywhere, even in supposedly tranquil suburbs. But I also witnessed the resilience of a community that, once freed from a tyrant's grip, strove to become more empathetic and cohesive. The final chapter closed with Karen paying the ultimate price, loss of her freedom and her property, for her stubborn and misguided crusade. In her quest to protect River Glen Heights from an imaginary threat, she had ironically inflicted the worst harm on it herself. Yet from the wreckage, neighbors banded together to ensure that their little pocket of suburban America became the welcoming haven it was always meant to be. And so, River Glen Heights stands today, not as a cautionary example of an out-of-control HOA, but as a reclaimed, vibrant place, free from the oppressive reign of one woman who thought she could outmaneuver the United States Army.